How could 2,000 humble villagers, peasants, scholars, and volunteer fighters face the fury of 15,000 armored Ming cavalry and soldiers? What chance did simple men, armed with bamboo spears and leather shields, have against war horses thundering in steel? Could hunger break them? Could fear bend them? Could death silence their will? No, because they fought not for glory, not for gold, not even for life itself, but for freedom. Guided by the genius of Nguyen Trai, bound together by unity and driven by a burning desire to be free, this fragile force stood against an empire and won. But how? How did the powerless overcome the powerful? The answer lies in the valley of Chilang. The year was 1427. For 2 long, merciless decades, the land of Dai Viet had groaned under the weight of Ming occupation. What was declared as restoring order had become a reign of terror. Heavy taxes stripped farmers of their harvest. Labor conscriptions dragged sons from their families to die in foreign wars. Temples and shrines were reduced to ashes. Books were burned to silence history. Villages were torn apart. Women wailed for their husbands, and children cried from hunger. The Ming were not merely rulers, they were erasers. They sought to wipe out a nation's soul, to turn Dai Viet into nothing more than a forgotten province of their empire. Yet the fire of a people cannot be extinguished. In the rugged mountains of Than Hoa, a spark was born. Le Loi, once a nobleman, became the heart of resistance. With a band of followers, peasants, scholars, and warriors, he vowed not to bow. His cause was not expansion or conquest, it was survival. His dream, that his children and the children of his people might live free on the soil of their ancestors. For 10 years, the Lam Son uprising endured. They struck like shadows from the forests, vanished into rivers, and re-emerged stronger. They starved, they bled, they buried their dead, yet they fought on. Each victory came at great cost, yet each loss hardened their resolve. By 1427, the rebellion was no longer a whisper in the mountains. It was a storm rising across the land. And then came the boldest act, the siege of Xuong Giang, a mighty Ming fortress in the north. If Xuong Giang fell, the Ming stronghold in Dai Viet would collapse. Le Loi knew it. Nguyen Trai, his brilliant strategist, knew it. And in Beijing, the emperor of the Ming knew it too. To the Ming, losing Dai Viet was unacceptable. To them, this was rebellion that had to be crushed at any cost. And so the emperor sent not one, but 2 great armies. The first, commanded by Lu Sheng, known in Vietnamese history as Lu Thang, numbered more than 100,000 soldiers. Cavalry wrapped in steel armor, horses armored head to flank, crossbowmen trained with deadly precision, and infantry drilled in countless campaigns across China. Their banners filled the horizon, black and red, like thunderclouds before a storm. The second, under Mu Sheng, brought another 50,000 men, forming a tidal wave of imperial might. In total, more than 150,000 Ming soldiers marched south. It was a force meant not only to break the rebels, but to drown them utterly, to erase even the idea of resistance. And against this avalanche stood Le Loi, with barely 20,000 men. Farmers turned into soldiers, wielding spears hammered in village forges, bows strung by hand, swords beaten from farm tools. Their armor was light, often nothing more than cloth, bamboo, or leather. Many had no armor at all, only courage. Shields were wooden, fragile before the clash of iron. They had no endless treasury, no supply of steel, no legions of horsemen. On parchment, they were already defeated. The difference was overwhelming. One side, a colossal empire, rich, disciplined, armed with the finest weapons of its age. The other, a small nation, poor in numbers, fragile in arms, but unbreakable in spirit. This was no balanced war. This was the clash of giant and ant, of flood and stone, of empire and freedom. The Ming marched with arrogance, confident that sheer numbers would crush all. But Le Loi marched with a truth greater than numbers. a people's will to live free. Thus the stage was set. A storm of steel and fire was descending upon Dai Viet. The valley of Chi Lang waited, silent, its mountains and rivers prepared to witness destiny. Le Loi understood the impossible odds. 20,000 against 150,000. Bamboo shields against steel armor. Village spears against imperial cavalry. On parchment, the rebellion was doomed. But Le Loi was not fighting on parchment. He was fighting on his land, on the rivers, forests, and valleys of Dai Viet. And he had beside him a mind as sharp as any sword, Nguyen Trai. Scholar, strategist, and statesman, Nguyen Trai believed that wars were not won by numbers alone, but by wisdom, by timing, by the will of the people. Together they formed a plan that was nothing short of audacious. The key was Xuong Giang. By laying siege to this fortress, they forced the Ming to act. The enemy could not allow Xuong Giang to fall. They would march south in haste, burdened by arrogance, desperate to break the siege quickly. That haste would be their undoing. And so, while Le Loi's men tightened the noose around Xuong Giang, the real battlefield was chosen far to the north. At the valley of Chi Lang, a narrow stretch of land flanked by steep mountains and dense forests. A place where cavalry could not maneuver, where vast numbers would mean nothing. A place where the land itself could fight alongside its people. Nguyen Trai understood the psychology of his foe. The Ming believed themselves invincible. With more than 100,000 men, Liu Sheng would march recklessly, eager for glory, certain that the rebels would scatter before him. But the more he advanced, the deeper he would walk into the jaws of the trap. Lam Son's soldiers prepared in silence. Ambushes were dug into the slopes. Archers melted into the trees. Pits were covered. Spears were sharpened. The people themselves became part of the army, guiding, feeding, carrying, hiding. Every village, every path, every stream became a weapon. To the outside eye, the Ming were unstoppable. But to Le Loi, every step the enemy took was another thread tightening around their neck. The trap was set. The bait was Xuong Giang. The blade would fall at Chi Lang, and soon the armies would collide. The valley of Chi Lang lay silent. Mist clung to the mountains, the grass wet with morning dew. Then, like thunder rolling down from the north, the Ming vanguard appeared. Tens of thousands of armored soldiers poured into the valley. Horses pounded the earth, banners whipped in the wind, drums thundered with the promise of destruction. At their head rode Liu Sheng, arrogant, confident, certain that the rebels would break before the might of the empire. But the silence of the valley was not fear, it was anticipation. It was the stillness before the strike. As the Ming advanced deeper, the trap snapped shut. From the ridges, horns blared. Arrows darkened the sky. Hidden trenches swallowed horses whole. Vietnamese warriors clad in leather and cloth surged from the trees with spears and blades flashing. Their cries echoed like thunder. The clash was brutal, chaotic, unstoppable. Ming cavalry, the pride of the empire, charged forward, only to find the ground treacherous, their formation broken, their speed useless in the narrow pass. Horses screamed as they stumbled into pits. Men toppled beneath crushing hooves. The Ming fought with cruelty. They hacked at villagers who resisted, set fire to huts, and cut down anyone in their path. But for every act of terror, the Lam Son answered with courage. Vietnamese soldiers clung to their enemy, striking at close range, pulling riders from saddles, dragging armored men into the mud where their heavy armor became their coffin. Tran Nguyen Hun and Lê Sat directed the fury with cold precision. One wave struck, then vanished into the forest. Another appeared at the flank, raining arrows before retreating into shadows. The Ming army, vast and disciplined on open plains, now found itself blinded, bleeding, and bewildered. Every tree hid an enemy. Every rock concealed death. Liu Sheng raged. He ordered charge after charge, but the valley betrayed him. His numbers, his armor, his cavalry, all useless. The more he pressed forward, the more men he lost. And then, in the chaos, it happened. A surge of Lam Son fighters broke through the Ming guard. Spears thrust, swords flashed, and Liu Sheng himself was struck down. The mighty general, the emperor's chosen hammer, collapsed in the mud of Qilang. The valley roared with triumph, but the battle was far from over. The Ming host, though leaderless, still numbered in the tens of thousands. They would not flee easily. The chase, the slaughter, and the struggle had only just begun. The fall of Liu Sheng should have broken the Ming. Yet like a wounded beast, the vast army still writhed and clawed. Tens of thousands of soldiers, leaderless and desperate, surged southward in a frenzy. The valley of Qilang had become their grave, but the road ahead would become their torment. The Lam Son generals knew the moment had come. Tran, Nguyen Han, Lasat, and others pressed the attack with relentless fury. They gave the enemy no rest. By day, arrows rained from the ridges. By night, ambushes struck from the shadows. What had begun as a battle turned into a hunt. At Can Tram, the retreating Ming were cut apart. Spears clashed, swords rang, and the river ran red with blood. Vietnamese warriors hurled themselves into the fray, striking with the desperation of men who knew their freedom lay in every thrust. The Ming, furious, turned their rage on civilians, burning villages, slaughtering innocents to vent their frustration. But for every act of cruelty, the Lam Son answered with steel. Farmers armed with nothing more than a spear leapt upon armored riders, dragging them into the mud. Archers loosed fire-tipped arrows, igniting wagons and supplies. Then came Phocat, where the trap closed tighter. The Ming, hungry and exhausted, staggered into another ambush. From both flanks, the Lam Son charged, voices thundering, weapons flashing, horses screamed, men fell, and chaos devoured the field. Entire regiments dissolved beneath the onslaught. The Ming army had been a flood, a torrent of iron and fire. Now it was a river breaking apart, spilling into streams of panic, each chased, harried, and struck down. The arrogance of the empire dissolved into terror. The roads were littered with broken lances, shattered shields, and corpses that marked every mile. And through it all, the courage of the Vietnamese blazed. Outnumbered still, they fought as if the land itself fought with them. They struck, vanished, and struck again, turning mountains and rivers into allies. For every 10 Ming soldiers, one Vietnamese warrior stood, and yet it was the 10 who fell. What began at Qilang had become a rolling storm, chasing the enemy ever southward. Soon all roads would lead to Xuong Giang, where the final reckoning awaited. While the shattered remnants of Liu Sheng's army bled across the countryside, the fortress of Xuong Giang stood alone. Within its walls, thousands of Ming soldiers waited anxiously for relief. Their food dwindled. Disease crept through their ranks. Each sunrise brought hope of salvation. Each sunset brought despair. But no salvation came. The armies sent to rescue them had been annihilated, first at Qilang, then in the relentless pursuit southward. Now the fortress was surrounded, its lifeline severed. Laloy and Nguyen Trai tightened the siege with iron discipline. Towers were built, trenches cut deep. Archers harassed the walls day and night. Flaming arrows arced through the sky, crashing into rooftops, setting the night ablaze. The thunder of drums rolled across the fields as Lam Son warriors pressed closer. Inside, the Ming grew desperate. They unleashed volleys of arrows, poured boiling oil, hurled stones from the ramparts. They cursed in rage, their cruelty burning as fierce as ever. Civilians trapped within the walls suffered most, starved between two merciless masters. But the Lam Son would not yield. Their courage was carved from suffering, their resolve unshakable. Then at dawn, the order was given. The final assault began. The air filled with smoke and fire. Siege ladders slammed against the walls. Vietnamese warriors climbed, defying arrows that tore through flesh. Some fell, pierced and broken, yet others rose to take their place. Battering rams pounded at the gates, each strike echoing like the heartbeat of destiny. With a thunderous crash, the gates gave way. Lam Son soldiers surged inside, clashing with Ming defenders in narrow streets. Steel rang against steel, shouts, screams, and the clash of blades turned Xuong Giang into a cauldron of death. The Ming fought with savage fury, slashing, stabbing, clawing to the last. But the tide was unstoppable. By sunset, the banners of Dai Viet flew from the walls. The fortress was taken. The Ming garrison lay in ruins. Xuong Giang had fallen, and with it, the last hope of the empire in Dai Viet. The road to freedom was open, but one final act remained. The empire itself had to concede defeat. With Xuong Giang in flames and Lu Xing dead at Chilang, the Ming war machine collapsed. The second column, under Mu Sheng, still lingered near the border. But when news reached him, news of annihilation, of generals slain, of armies shattered, his courage dissolved. He fled back across the frontier, his men harried and broken, leaving behind the dream of conquest. The once mighty invasion of 150,000 had ended in ruin. Barely a fraction limped home. The rest lay in rivers, on roadsides, and beneath the soil of Dai Viet. Their banners, once proud and terrible, were trampled into mud. In December of 1427, the Ming court had no choice. They sent envoys to Lalois. The message was bitter. They would withdraw. After 20 years of occupation, of blood, of fire, the empire bent its knee. And so, the war ended. The invaders marched north, their columns thin, their pride shattered. Behind them, the people of Dai Viet raised their heads for the first time in a generation. The chains were broken. The land was free. In the spring of 1428, Laloy was crowned emperor, founding the later Le dynasty. By his side, Nguyen Trai, the scholar whose words and wisdom had guided the war, carved the victory into history with the immortal proclamation: to bring peace to the people, to wash away humiliation, and to prove that heaven's will belongs to those who fight for justice. The Battle of Chilang, Xuong Giang, was more than a victory. It was the triumph of the weak over the strong, the few over the many, the oppressed over the oppressor. It was proof that no empire, however vast, can extinguish a people's will to be free. And so, from the valley of Chilang to the walls of Xuong Giang, the earth itself remembers. The mountains whisper the story. The rivers carry its echo. The story of a small nation that defied an empire. The story of courage, sacrifice, and destiny. The story of freedom won with blood. This was the end of the Ming War. This was the dawn of a nation's greatness.